following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week, a lot of road action, a lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacey and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, episode number 160 on the eve of National Signing Day for Georgia Southern football, just around the corner on Wednesday. It's National Signing Day, the early signing day. I guess they still call it early signing day, even though it's kind of become the de facto signing day. But Georgia Southern men's and women's basketball in full swing. We will dive into anything and everything Georgia Southern athletics. You can join the conversation with Danny Reed and I by commenting on Facebook Live or tweeting at GS Sports Network, also by texting us at 912-274-3607. Would love to hear from you.
12 days away from Christmas.
Ooh.
It makes me think about what we could do for a Georgia Southern 12 days of Christmas.
You know, one point, it's one of my first years here, the university marketing did a 'Twas the Night Before Christmas Georgia Southern style. I would assume it's still on YouTube or something. Have to go back and look at it. It was pretty entertaining.
'Twas the night before Christmas and all through Hanner Fieldhouse.
It was something like that. Like they changed it and Gus was in the Santa suit laying in a nest, and I just remember Blair had to do the voiceover, and we sat there for hours trying to come up with what it was going to be. It was a lot of fun. But everything's starting to wind down. Final exams are over, which means there's a lot less traffic out on Fair Road.
For sure.
But speaking of final exams being over, you had 11 student-athletes go through their stole ceremony last week, and this is something that's really cool that Reggie Simpkins and his crew over at Student Athlete Services that do a fantastic job and are getting much-needed rest at this point in time. But doing a stole ceremony to make it more of a special thing to be a student-athlete because of the rigors that you have to go through, going through the athlete part of it, and then also being a student and completing your degree here at Georgia Southern. That's something that I think goes unnoticed a lot, but do a really good job of having a separate ceremony to give them the stole that they wear over their gown that says student athlete on it with the Sunbelt logo. But the 11 seniors that were graduating, Dylan Springer, J.D. King, and Anthony Beck from Georgia Southern football, Alhaji Tambadu, Jack Phillip, Yokel Blankston, and Corey Irvin from men's soccer. Jamar Lincoln from men's basketball has also done some work with Learfield and Georgia Southern Sports Properties. Carlos Garcia from men's tennis, Faith Shirley from softball, and Haley Fuller from Georgia Southern volleyball getting their degrees. Now the graduation ceremonies are spread out through the next couple of days, but they will be walking at some point over the next couple of days, so a huge congratulations out to them.
We visited with Reggie Simpkins on an edition of Hail Southern Live earlier this year, and we had a chance to go into some detail about bringing that stole ceremony from Louisiana Tech here. And I know that that's something that those student-athletes look forward to every year. It's not the graduation ceremony, but that kind of gets them in the mood to say, there's some finality here.
Yeah.
The time as a college student-athlete is just about done. Now, in the case of J.D., Dylan, and Beck, of course, got an opportunity to come back and play a little bit more thanks to the COVID waiver year. But that's when it starts to hit that the real world, so to speak, isn't that far away.
No, it's not. Something else that's not too far away, Georgia Southern baseball had a cool story come out in, two of them the last couple of days. Late last week, you had the story that Rolly DeArmas, the former Georgia Southern Eagle, spent the first 2 years at Miami-Dade, then made his way to Georgia Southern when Coach Ron Polk made his way to Statesboro as well. But he's been in the Phillies minor league system for almost 50 years now.
Yeah.
has done a really good job down with the Phillies. Florida Gulf Coast League, I guess it's the Florida Complex League now, whatever they decided to call it.
You've had the reorganization of the minors over the last 2 years since MLB now owns MILB, but they've had to change some of the names.
But he won the Cool Ball Award, which is something that's really cool. And it's not just you're a really good manager, but it's player development, work ethic, and really the dedication to the game of baseball, winning that award for the 2021 season for minor league baseball. But Aaron Soka did a really good job on the story. He and I got to catch up with Rolly through kind of the back channels of USA Baseball. Really appreciate Brad Young helping us out, getting Rolly to talk, but a fantastic human being. It goes through his story about how he's been a part of 2 Olympic teams with USA Baseball, been a part of Pan American Games, World Baseball Classic, whatever it was before the World Baseball Classic, and so many different things that he has done. And then his time with the Phillies, he tells the story, and Aaron did a good job of kind of recapping this, of in 2008 when the Phillies actually won the World Series, the bullpen coach for the Phillies at the time got sick, and so he had to go up to the big club for a couple of weeks, and he knew that he was going to be going to Beijing with USA Baseball for the 2008 Olympics. So he went over to Beijing, did the Olympics, came back. He wasn't sure if he was going to go back to Florida for the rookie league or if he was going to go back and join the big club. They called him to go back to the big club, and they won, I think it was 14 of their last 16 to win the NL East, go on to win the 2008 World Series. And he said that's a pretty good thing when you can bring home a bronze medal and a World Series ring all in the same year.
I can remember that year because it meant so much, not only to the city of Philadelphia, because the Phillies hadn't had a whole lot of success for a number of years, but the fact that that was one of the final calls that Harry Callis had a chance to make.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Because it wasn't too far after that he passed away.
I had forgotten about that. But yeah, Rolly, a fantastic human being, got to sit down, and we said we were going to talk for 15, 20 minutes, and it ended up being about 30. And
it always goes that way.
Oh, no doubt. And we'll have different clips of that coming out over the next couple of weeks and months as we get closer to Georgia Southern baseball season. But one of my favorite stories that he told, and we'll get it out from his perspective a little bit later, I asked him, I was like, he's talked about Ron Polk pretty much this entire interview. Give us a good Ron Polk story, because everybody's got a good Ron Polk story. He said, well, I think one of his first ejections here at Georgia Southern was my fault. So he didn't go into a whole lot of detail because I think he was trying to protect the innocent. But
you know, when Polk took over, he was only here for 4 years, but of course he led Georgia Southern to the College World Series in '73. But when he had to remake this program, the 2 Miami-Dade programs were a big reason why that success was had those 4 years. That roster was heavily from the South Florida area, and granted, recruiting has changed a little bit, but that was a huge reason why Georgia Southern became a national program and why they went to Rosenblatt, had a chance to play in Omaha.
And he was talking about how 72, that they were a really good team that year, had a couple of people from the 2 Miami-Dade programs like you talked about. They were 1 win away against Jacksonville from going to the NCAA playoffs that year as well, into a regional, and then the next year is when, of course, Georgia Southern goes to the College World Series. But a lot of really good things to pick out through that interview and pick out through that article that's up on gseagles.com. While we're talking baseball for a moment, kind of go a little bit down a side street, but a really nice honor from the Georgia Dugout Club. The 2022 Hall of Fame inductions were happening earlier on this week, and Jim Simmons, the late Jim Simmons, over from Statesboro High School, also a former Georgia Southern Eagle, being inducted into the Georgia Dugout Club Hall of Fame.
Yeah, when we spoke with Coach Hennon about him earlier this year, somebody that has been involved not necessarily with Statesboro High School, but he's been a coach at a number of different schools over the course of a long and storied history. We talked about Griffin Davis pitching the day after he had passed away, and the story of Griffin had been well chronicled for the couple of years before. That got a lot of people. And we know that Griffin always got some of the loudest cheers, mostly from Mom Tammy, who somehow could be heard over the other 1,000 people at J.I. Clements Stadium. But that was one of the more noteworthy moments from last year, having him come in the day after his former coach passed away.
So really good stuff coming out of the Georgia Dugout Club, a great organization that does a lot for the game of baseball in the state of Georgia. But Moving on to Georgia Southern football, a couple of new faces around the football operations center. Coach Clay Helton meeting with the media earlier on this morning to kind of go through, and I really like what he said to start that press conference, was that he could have just tackled two birds with one stone coming up on Wednesday on signing day, because he knows everybody's going to be there on signing day as well, and he's going to have to do another press conference. But I liked how he said he really wanted to do this ahead of time to make sure signing day was all about the recruits and the commitments coming into Georgia Southern.
And if you would have done both on Wednesday, look, it would have been fine. But today you can't talk about recruits yet. Even though they may say, I'm coming to Georgia Southern, it doesn't matter until they are official at some point on Wednesday morning, afternoon, and beyond. Then you can speak about those guys more candidly. But since this is the first true staff overhaul since 2016, you're not having a staff where someone takes over and then most of the staff returns, and of course a couple would be sprinkled in here and there. That was when Coach Lunsford took over 4 years ago. But this is a true overhaul. Coach Whitley is back. Assistant head coach, he's still going to be responsible for the corners, but these are a lot of people that we don't know a ton about, and we will get to know more about. We'll get some interviews out with those over the next coming weeks and months, but these are guys that they may be from this part of the country, may be familiar recruiting-wise, but we don't yet know a ton about them.
So we told you last week that the new offensive coordinator for Georgia Southern was going to be Brian Ellis.
Now we know about him.
Yeah.
We know about him a little bit.
We covered him last week. Just kind of recapping, coming in from Western Kentucky. Also told you that Kevin Whitley we knew he was going to be back on staff, but getting his assignment of cornerbacks coach and also assistant head coach. Also talked about Ryan Smith as well. And I think that was the only three at this point last week that we knew about. The next couple of hours, next couple of days, it trickled in that Ryan Appland is coming in to be the pass game coordinator, tight ends coach, inside receivers. He's going to have a long business card coming in after a running backs coach at Arkansas State in 2021, where he was the SoCon Player of the Year twice at Arkansas State. He was actually the quarterback at Arkansas State when Rachel worked out there, so knows him well and says he's an absolutely fantastic guy. But he was the co-OC and running back coach at Western Kentucky as well. He's also spent time at Chattanooga, North Alabama, and Auburn as well. So this is one that pretty excited about.
Talk with Brad Bobo and Matt Stoltz about him because they both know him extremely well. Number one, super individual. Number two, couldn't be happier for him. Yeah. Of course, they're convinced that he's going to come back to Jonesboro in a few years and be the head coach of Arkansas State. That's when Butch Jones gets that program back on track and then goes on to greener pastures, so to speak. But they're happy for him. Recently had another child, so they're coming to the area, and he is a rising star in coaching. I'm just going to put that out there. Now, if you didn't know much about him, you're going to know a lot more about him.
Yeah. No doubt about that. Also got the running backs coach coming in. Ephraim Reed was an offensive analyst at Michigan State from 2020 to 2021. Was at Louisiana, his alma mater, from 2018 to 2019. Helped coach Kenneth Walker, a Heisman candidate at one point this season. And he is somebody that has seen it and had done it at the highest level, but also knows the Sun Belt Conference very well from his time at Louisiana.
Yeah, there's a popular saying that the easiest job at Georgia Southern is to be the running backs coach because you have so much depth in that room already. But in the case of Ephraim Reed, somebody who had to earn everything that he got during his time as a Cajun, I anticipate that if there's any more to get out of that running back room, he is going to find a way to do it.
Also got the special teams coordinator in the last day or so. Turner West coming over, was the special teams and recruiting coordinator at the Citadel the last few years, was a linebackers coach at Austin Peay, was a defensive assistant with the Dallas Cowboys for 4 years. So he is going to be mainly focusing on special teams. I would assume he would also have a little bit of linebacker duties as well, but his main title is special teams coordinator in that Turner West.
Might have a little bit of familiarity with his father, Tommy, former head coach at Clemson. Scott Sloan played for him, former Georgia Southern assistant, now the defensive line coach at Middle Tennessee. So being able to get someone from that tree is beneficial. And somebody that has NFL experience.
Yeah.
You can say that you've been with the Cowboys.
Yeah, you don't spend 4 years with the Cowboys and
got to pick up
be
something.
A slum.
Right.
Robert Steiner also named the strength and conditioning for Georgia Southern football. He was the director of football sports performance for Coach Helton at USC in 2021. He spent time at Notre Dame, Mississippi State, Cincinnati, you name it, he's been there. But also, has worked with the U.S. Olympic Training Center, but also ties to Georgia, working at Valdosta State.
And he's from Brantley County.
How about it?
Brantley County High School.
How about it? The Herons. You didn't think I knew that, did you?
I didn't know that.
I only knew it because SEB played them this year. But that's your staff as of right now. Coach Helton talked about it earlier on today in the press gathering. You're going to see more of the defensive staffs come on. A lot of the defensive coordinators that he's looking at, it's a good problem because they are still playing at this point in time, whether it be bowl, he said even possibly an NFL experience as well. But it's somebody that's still playing right now. There's a reason they're still playing and looking at that avenue. So it may not be done before signing day on Wednesday, but it'll be shortly thereafter.
You got to get them in, but you've got to make sure it's the right fit, and I think we talked about that a little bit last week. You just don't want to say, hey, come run my defense and not necessarily be aligned. That's a word that we've heard a lot from the university side, with the athletic side, with all the facility upgrades that are coming. There needs to be alignment, and that's even more so true for the staff that Coach Helton is about to finalize over the next few weeks.
And he talked about it too, having somebody like Kevin Whitley that is so relationship-based. He had a relationship with all of the defensive commits already for Georgia Southern, and so it was a seamless transition. He was already going to be on staff, so you don't have to rush that process more than you wanted to.
And I would anticipate on Wednesday at least a dozen, maybe somewhere around 15 guys will say that they're coming to Georgia Southern. Now that could fluctuate a little bit less, a little bit more, just depending on who wants to say yes for the early period. But to go in a little bit more depth on Coach Whitley, keeping him here, you don't need to worry about Atlanta and the surrounding areas.
No.
He's got that.
Yeah, he got that one on lock.
He's good.
He knows 285 well.
No, nowhere else. But as far as Atlanta and we'll call it the circle, and whatever's into and around the circle, he's got it.
Inside the perimeter.
Yeah.
Ugh, 285.
We by design never take 285 in our travels.
We don't. I will take 75 straight through the heart of Atlanta any day of the week.
I will walk.
Yeah, you'd probably get there faster than 285. Would you look ahead for Georgia Southern women's basketball? It has been a highly offensive last couple of days for Georgia Southern.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
Yes. On Saturday against Gardner-Webb, set the school record for single game scoring with 121 points, 121 to 105. The crew chief for that game, Angel Kent, is a NBA G League official. Asked her when we started the third quarter, I was like, man, you probably feel like you're in a G League game. She goes, yeah, this is probably the most running I've done in a basketball game in a while. But 121 to 105, Georgia Southern gets the victory over Gardner-Webb. And Gardner-Webb, the entire offense was based around two players, Lauren Bevis and Jessica Williams. Williams had 38. Bevis had 33. I don't know the last time that I've seen somebody score 105 points, have two players with 30-plus, and lose. But Georgia Southern was able to do it with 121 points. Maya Burns led the way with a career-high 24 points, had four other Eagles in double figures. Simone James finished with 18, had three really big threes throughout that game. And it was a game where Georgia Southern led by 25 points with about 8 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. Gardner-Webb able to get the lead back down to single digits. About 3 or 4 minutes left, and then Georgia Southern able to lengthen it back out towards the tail end of the game. But a 121 to 105 victory over Gardner-Webb. Really, really impressive. And then you turn the table to this morning, where Georgia Southern broke their own school record for most points in a single game with 133, with a 133 to 15 victory over Carver. You heard that right. 133 to 15 victory over Carver. That's what you call getting it done. Georgia Southern with 8 players in double figures. You had everybody that was active. Didn't have Taryn Ward in this one because she was out because of a concussion. Didn't have Taryn Ward, but everybody else played. Everybody else scored in this game, and sharing the basketball to the tune of 22 assists. Georgia Southern just 11 turnovers. Carver had 49 turnovers, and that was the big part of the game. 49 turnovers. Georgia Southern scoring 78 points off of turnovers. I haven't seen numbers like that in a long time, if I've ever seen them.
No, even some of the games where Georgia Southern men, the matchup against Carver from a couple of years ago, the points in the paint, the points in the bench are usually pretty inflated, but I can never remember an instance where 78 points off of turnovers. You'd have to go maybe a month's worth of games to get to that kind of statistic.
We looked at Georgia Southern broke a lot of records, and when you score 133, you're going to.
Yeah, I would be worried if you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. ESPN put out a note after the game. It's the second largest margin of victory by a Division I team in a game in NCAA history. The only one greater than that was in 2018 when Savannah State, coincidentally enough, beat Wesleyan 155-26.
And that would have been their final year before making the transition to D2. So you almost
got it.
Almost set the record.
But Georgia Southern gets it done with a 133-15 victory over Carver. They will look ahead to a couple of good non-conference matchups to round out the non-conference slate. Hard to believe we're almost a conference play. Good. I know we got to get through Christmas first, but
yeah.
On Friday, they will head to Kennesaw to take on the Kennesaw State Owls, 7 p.m. the tip-off from the KSU Convocation Center, and then we'll head back home to take on Bethune-Cookman coming up on Sunday for a 3 p.m. tip-off there, and then it's time for conference play. Women's basketball starts at a little bit different. You guys are out in Arkansas the entire time.
Yep.
Women will start on Thursday against Arkansas State in Hanner and then fly out to Little Rock for a New Year's Day game at the Jack Stevens Center. For whatever reason. I don't quite understand it. But
so we will both be in the same state on New Year's Day, but we will not cross paths.
Correct. Okay. Because we will be flying out New Year's Eve to Little Rock, and you guys will be leaving Little Rock on the 30th.
That's right.
I would assume. Unless there's some crazy travel plans in there. But
well, Brian Berg used to be an assistant there, so maybe we'd have to hang out.
Have some of his favorite watering holes he has to go to.
One of his former stops is coming up on Wednesday, going to Campbell.
Switching it over to Georgia Southern men, got the 85-43 victory over Carver at home this past Wednesday. Really good game for Georgia Southern as far as taking care of business. There were a couple of things that we talked with Coach Berg after the game. Got to clean up, but when you put up 85 points and hold your opponent to 43, it's a pretty good day at the office.
And if Carver didn't make those 5 wild shots in the final couple of minutes, they would have been in the 30s, maybe even under 30. And if there's one thing that they probably were upset about, I know Coach Berg was during the Ford locker room wrap-up, 20 turnovers, and it seemed that it was forced a little bit when they tried to go up tempo. They've tried to do it at times this year, but it seems that that's where the turnovers are surfacing. That's what happened when the Eagles were trying to come back on Saturday against Mercer. But the fact that they did get a win by 42 points when they committed that many turnovers because they still shot the ball so well, 63%, and defended so well, those have been the keys. Those have been part of the recipe this year. And then against Mercer, they did it in reverse, almost came back and won, but they weren't able to overcome their worst shooting performance since moving into the month of December.
It was a 77-68 loss at the hands of the Mercer Bears, and we've talked about it, one of the best unknown rivalries in college basketball in the state of Georgia. It's one that should be played, I think, every year.
Yeah.
But a 77-68 victory for Mercer over Georgia Southern. 3 Eagles in double figures. Kamari Brown with 14, along with Elijah McCadden and Andrei Saversov with 10 points and 6 rebounds as well.
Just not used to a team that has been shooting 51% for the season. They've been top 10 in the country all year. They only made 4 of 20 from 3 because they got down so much. They had to start jacking up threes to try to catch back up and credit Mercer. They were very good in the gaps, and Georgia Southern didn't do enough around the rim. But like we just talked about, whenever the game tried to speed up a little bit, and the Eagles forced 18 turnovers, but it seemed that when they tried to get into transition, Mercer was back, and they were able to force some timely turnovers. I can think they got it down to 5 with about 2 minutes left. Georgia Southern got a turnover, tried to run, but gave it right back in the lane, and from then on, it was free throw city. And it was a game where Georgia Southern finally made its free throws. They were 18-21. Mercer was 21-22.
Can't win for losing.
And it would have been another instance where the Eagles go 10 of 20, lose by a point, but in this instance, they didn't make a whole lot of shots. They forced turnovers, they dropped their own made free throws, but transition turnovers and not being able to score enough, especially in that first half.
77-68, the Mercer victory over Georgia Southern this past Saturday. They look to put that behind them when they head up to Bowies Creek, North Carolina to take on the Campbell Fighting Camels. 7 o'clock tip-off from Bowies Creek. It's a Campbell team that is always picked towards the top of their conference in the Big South. 7-2 their record. Haven't had a whole lot of competition. Their 2 losses coming at number 9 Duke when they went to the Duke Showcase up in Durham, and then falling to VCU just a couple of days ago, back on December the 4th. But it's been relatively tight games. Hasn't, again, not necessarily the competition level maybe that Georgia Southern has seen this year, but still a really good Campbell team.
And they got everybody back.
Yeah.
We talk about COVID giving teams guys back that ordinarily would be moving on, graduating, and finishing up their eligibility. They've got all 5 of their starters back, 9 lettermen. I think it's 99% of their production. I don't know what happened to the other 1%, but Kevin McGeehan is in year 9 up there. They run a Princeton-style system. He brought that over from Richmond, where he was with Chris Mooney for 8 years, and they've given teams trouble for 2 decades running this system. Constant movement, constant backdoors. They always shoot extremely well from the field, especially from 2, because most of their shots are layups, because defenses are not ready for all the back cutting. Now, typically, they'd be bouncing out the layups with 3s, but they're not shooting it great from distance this year. But because they're about 60% from 2, and because they're defending really well with their increased athleticism, that's where they've given teams problems. 2 all-league guys are on their roster with Whitfield and with Henderson, but the guy that's really fun is the 6'8 Spaniard, Jesus Carolero. He is a guard. He is a guard trapped in a forward's body, but everything he does is fun. I think he takes advantage of people not figuring out what kind of player he is, because he's 6'8", 215. He's not going to be able to handle like a point guard. He dribbles, he passes, he has great spin moves along the baseline. He can score against anybody. He's a very crafty player and somebody that Georgia Southern has got to be mindful of on Wednesday night.
That'll be a 7 o'clock tip-off up in Bowies Creek, North Carolina, so you'll having to be following signing day from afar.
And we're going to leave tomorrow. We'll get a shooter out in tomorrow night. And while signing day will take a lot of focus early on Wednesday, I can't help but think what this means emotionally to Brian Berg to be able to go back to a place where he got his first Division I assistant coaching job. He worked with Robbie Lang, former Eagle assistant up at Campbell, from 09 through 13. While they were there, they picked up victories against Auburn. They handily beat an Iowa team in 2011, and I know that this means a lot to him to be able to go back up to that area. Also spent some time in North Carolina at NC Central, but after he was director of operations for Kermit Davis at Middle Tennessee 07 through 09, this was his first opportunity, and being able to tie it back to Robbie Lang being here, that's pretty neat.
They will move on to Saturday matchup inside Hander Fieldhouse against Covenant College. The Scots coming in for a 3 o'clock tip-off on Saturday.
So that means I'll have to do that game in a Scottish accent. I'm going to wear a kilt.
I wouldn't. With the way we have to get behind the table, I wouldn't.
Yeah, especially our table. Covenant's good, though. 6-2 record. They won't have played since last Saturday, so they're going to get a 7-day in-between period to get ready for the Eagles. Will Crumley is a guy that averages 17-7. He's been All-USA South Conference 3 years. He was Player of the Year in the conference 2 years ago. He's one of the top scorers in school history. So even though it's a Division III team stepping up, I know he's looking forward to this opportunity.
You mentioned Covenant not playing until Georgia Southern. The next 3 opponents for Georgia Southern will not play until the Eagles. You've got Campbell, obviously, Wednesday. That's duh. Covenant, you're like, that's kind of odd. And then Fordham the following Wednesday, because they've got final exams this week.
Right.
They won't play until Georgia Southern coming up there the 22nd.
10-day break. They just played Miami yesterday at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Almost beat the Hurricanes, but they'll get a full 10 days to prep for Georgia Southern, that first ever matchup. I'll be in transit on Monday, so we'll have to figure out exactly how we do inside Eagle Nation.
Y'all are going up Monday?
We're going up an extra day early on the 20th for the game on that Wednesday, the 22nd, but that is one you always look forward to with Rose Hill Gym, and I don't want to get too much into it because it's out there, but Rose Hill Gym is one of the oldest facilities in the country. We'll get to that one. Campbell, though, it is a situation where it's a winnable game, and I expect it to be a closer game because both teams play a little bit of a slower pace, and for Campbell, you mentioned how many close games they've had. Because they work the shot clock so much, they might shoot a great field goal percentage, But because there aren't a whole lot of possessions, it's not an instance where they're going to go on a whole lot of big runs. They don't want to really do transition. They want to get you in the half court, make you defend, get you sleeping enough to find a back door, and then they're going to make a layup on you.
Campbell coming up on Wednesday, 7 o'clock, the tip-off from Bowie's Creek, North Carolina. Then Saturday against Covenant, 3 p.m. the tip-off inside Hanner Fieldhouse. And then we will get to Fordham next week and try to figure out how to zoom you in and all that fun technology nonsense.
Going to the Bronx.
The Bronx on December 22nd. If that's what's on your bucket list.
I will say that this is one that was on the schedule from a couple of years before. This is not one that happened this year. This was a present from Mark Byington. I'll just say that.
I can only imagine the thoughts going through his head right
but
now.
We'll get to that more next week because there's a good story behind it.
Oh, that's fantastic. That sounds like insider information right here.
Well, it's not a real revealing story, but it is a neat story.
Oh, that's not fun.
It's a neat story.
But we will get to Fordham coming up next week, and then it's so hard to believe it's almost the end of non-conference.
Yeah.
Crazy to think. In Georgia Southern women off to a really good start, now 8-2. First time they've had more than 7 wins in non-conference play since the early 90s. It's just so hard. It's like yesterday, we were getting ready for Ball State, but it was a month ago.
It might still be silly to think this way, but our minds have been COVID trained because we're still under this, how much are we going to get to do it? I think we're about past it, but every so often you're seeing games get called off, games get moved. Georgia State's had more COVID issues this year. They had a game against Tennessee State a little more than a week ago get canceled because of their own issues, and they've got some injury concerns as well in the non-conference. There was actually a league-wide Zoom that took place earlier today with all of the coaches from both the men's and women's side. A real nice job done by the conference office to get all of them together in advance of league play, which is coming up in the next few weeks. But I believe that when we get more past this, we can think, okay, games here, games there. But the way that this has gone for the last 2 years, it's basically, okay, is it going to happen still? Not as much as it was a year ago because everybody had their own pause. But now that we're at this point, it might be there a little bit, and we're trying to retrain our brains to what was back in early 2020. The speed at which non-conference play happens amazes me because of the way that exams work. And we've talked about the last 3 opponents having their own breaks before they played Georgia Southern. Well, the Eagles just had their 7-day break before they went and played Morehead State. So it just all depends on how that calendar falls.
I'm really looking forward to getting back into the swing of things, getting back into the routine of the Thursday, Saturday when you get into conference play. Because last year, I know it was conference play, but the back-to-back on Friday, Saturday, that didn't feel right. And so getting back to Thursday, Saturday, and when you get a couple of weeks into it, and by the time you get a couple of weeks into it, it's when you play your travel partner, so it messes that whole thing up. But you get a couple of weeks into it, I think that's when it's going to feel, okay, we're close to back. Georgia Southern packing 2,500 plus into Hanner Fieldhouse today for field trip day. Second highest attendance ever in Hanner Fieldhouse for a women's game. Really good to see that many people in Hanner Fieldhouse, even though they were all screaming after. Somebody thought it was a good idea to give them Coca-Cola for lunch. Chad and I were talking about it, and it kind of died down a little bit at the second quarter.
Sugar crash.
No. Into the second quarter, we were like, man, it kind of, not quiet by any stretch of the imagination, but it got quieter, relatively speaking, and Chad looked across because everybody was eating their lunch. And I look over, they're handing out Coca-Colas. What happened to the old milk cartons that you fold open? And Chad brought up a good point. You break open the wrong end, then you got to do the whole thing, and it turns into a mess.
Been there.
But what happened to the good old milk cartons? And then you get the third and fourth quarters. Good night. They were wired.
Did they offer the scorer's table any Coca-Cola?
I don't believe so. I don't think so. They didn't offer us any.
I didn't know Guy was doing PA.
Yes, he is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he does. He's done women's basketball for the last few years.
with the way our schedules have been, whenever...
That's true. You haven't seen women's basketball in a couple of years.
I don't think I've seen a women's game for... I think the Georgia State game, the blowout, was the last women's game I saw.
Huh.
The 25-point win, whatever it was.
That was fun.
Yeah.
You'll get to see... I can't remember what game it is, but women's play... We have a doubleheader. One doubleheader with the men's this year, later in the season.
I think that's something that the league has done for everybody. They get one. But
and then it turns into this weird deal where I think it may happen on opening weekend of conference play where you have a doubleheader, but it's against different men's opponents.
Didn't you have that a year ago
We had it in Texas, I think. Because I think it was a couple years ago because Bill Colhane kicked us out. He was nice about it. He didn't kick us out. But there's been a couple times. Troy, I think we've done it before, where women will play and then there will be a men's game after, but it'll be like Troy against Arlington. Some random... I don't know why they went away from the mirror. Never mind. We're not going to get into that.
I do know with the travel partner situation this year that when Georgia Southern plays Georgia State, the Thursday game is going to be in Atlanta and the Saturday game is going to be here, where typically you would get a full week to get ready for your opponent.
And see, since women's plays two less conference games than the men's do, women still have where we're up at Georgia State on a Saturday and then home on a Saturday. You only play one game that week. I think that's one of the games that turns into a doubleheader. I don't know. We'll cross that bridge.
This isn't going to be the one while you're going south on 75, we're going north on 75.
One where we wave.
Hello, yeah.
Hey, there's the bus. Hey.
Yeah, we've done that before.
Yeah, many times.
I just hope that when we go up, this will be the final time we'd go to the third floor because they're going to open up their new convocation center.
Thank goodness.
But a year ago when they had to institute their own COVID protocols, we were up on the fifth floor, and the stick out of their audio visual.
Yeah. I think I still have a knot on my head.
Well, you're tall enough where it may not have been an issue. Us shorter people, we get. It's nice if it rains inside, but if you get excited or anything, oh no.
Yeah, no, I clocked my head, and it was the first time. It was before we were there playing Georgia State. It was when we were in that holiday tournament because I stood up and hit my head when Coach Howard was coming up, and Larry Ward looked over at me and just started laughing.
I sat on the upper part of that wooden bench because I didn't want to have to sit. Oh, I think I couldn't sit because I couldn't see over the railing. Yep. So I sat
Sounds about right.
I sat on the top of that, like a park bench.
Yeah.
I sat on that top part, and that was not comfy.
I can't imagine it was.
That was not comfy. Not one of the smarter things I've ever done.
We've got whenever we get into this winter kind of lull, we need to do best and worst places we've ever had to call a game. Maybe not next week because you'll be in transit, but maybe the following week.
Period or Sunbelt?
Yes. Both.
There's a lot of minor league stadiums that are coming into
and we'll break it down by sport.
Clinton, Iowa.
I still go back to Western Michigan.
I'd have to, or I'll think about the Georgia Southern one, but the minor league one would probably be Clinton, Iowa. I'll tell you the bigger story about that later on, though.
All right. We'll dive into that in a couple of weeks. Was it Savannah? You thought you weren't going to make it?
No, it was Augusta.
Augusta, that's right.
Because
the open air.
The open air press box at Old Lake Olmsted Stadium. By the way, the new park.
Fantastic.
Gorgeous. I hope we get a chance to play there every year. I know it's on the schedule, but I hope that actually gets to happen every year. But yeah, the one day in Augusta, it was so hot. The only thing I could stand was a white T-shirt. And I don't think I passed out during...
You don't think?
I don't think I did. Eric Little came in.
Wait a minute. This is in question?
No, my head was on my scorebook, and Eric Little walks in behind me and just, making sure like you would. And I think I was just napping. I think
is this while the game was going on?
No. This is a good hour or two before.
2-2.
This is a good hour or two before first pitch. But yeah, the summers in the South Atlantic League for whether you're at historic Grayson Stadium, but there's air in that press box.
Yes.
even though it's its own room, which we've been there before for the CFC game a couple years ago. But for the open air where no air, a little hot.
A little toasty. We'll have to do that because that could be a fun conversation that might last more than an hour. But there's a lot of thoughts going through your mind right now.
Because I could feel the level of red on my face.
You're starting to sweat.
Well, the level of red on my face was getting up at my forehead level, and I could just... Because you can feel when your cheeks are getting red. And the closer it got to first pitch, even though it was getting later in the day, it seemed to get hotter. It was...
Sun goes down, it gets hotter.
And I don't want to make it sound like this is, way back in my day, but this is only 10, 12 years ago. But even so, it just, it felt like we were sitting on the sun.
I love hearing that story. We hear it about twice a year. We'll be on a road trip to some random midweek game and be like, hey, tell that story.
As soon as it gets to a point where, man, it's going to be hot. I guarantee it's not as hot as Augusta. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Cast and tug. But coming up on Wednesday, it'll be National Signing Day for Georgia Southern football. Again, you're expecting around a dozen, maybe 15 guys, maybe plus or minus a few. But that's what you're looking at for Georgia Southern football this year. You're not expecting a whole class. You're not expecting no class. You're kind of in that happy medium on Wednesday.
And you still have your class that's going to come in 422. You've still got the transfer portal, which, that little deal that's just out there, and now it's chock full of quarterbacks, major quarterbacks. With
almost the entire SEC.
And with a couple of the announcements from the last few days, and I know that may catch some people's attention here at Georgia Southern, but we'll just kind of have to play that as it goes. There's also been some talk that this may be the final year of the December period. They may bump it back to January. With all the coaching changes, it's just created a breakneck pace to get people in just to say you've got somebody because you've got a class you've got to sign.
And I don't know that... I think the December signing period took off a lot more than people thought it was going to. Because initially, early signing period, you'd get one or two guys that sign, and then everybody else would be in your typical one in February. But now it's a lot of places are signing most, if not their whole class, in December.
Because in the case of a group of 5, if you can find a way to woo somebody that has Power 5 aspirations, if you can get them to ink, you're set.
Yeah, you're done.
Instead of having to wait till February where all the back channels are getting worked, and is somebody going to stay true, or is somebody going to flip their commitment and put on a different ball cap by the time we get to that Wednesday in February. But if you can get them done in December, then that's one less thing. You can also institute the early enrollee period. If they can graduate from high school semester early, then they can get started. Guys like this year for Georgia Southern, Tyrell Davis and Mizell Williams, 2 applications of that.
It's going to be exciting to see. You're going to start to see what the new wave of Georgia Southern football looks like on Wednesday with National Signing Day. Get really one of our first times to be able to get one-on-one with some of the new coaches in town as well. And we will dive into everything in next week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Break down signing day for you. Break down everything that goes on with Georgia Southern men's and women's basketball. But until next week, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacey saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.